Hello and welcome back to another session. I'm joined here on stage with Jamie Keddie. Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
Hello. Jamie is our second guest speaker of the day. He is the founder of Lesson Stream, a community of teachers with a passion for using stories to engage students. He's also an author and creates YouTube videos for English teachers. We're so happy to have you here with us today, Jamie. It's really great. I'm really looking forward to your session. I think this is going to be really fun and interactive, lots of stories. So I can't wait. Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Thank you so much, Lise. Thank you, Ellii, for inviting me. Thank you to all you teachers, you lovely teachers, for being here. Thank you to thank you to Nick for that session I just enjoyed. Nick, I've not seen you for a while. That's quite a special beard you've been growing. You've gone all David Letterman on us, haven't you? I love it. It's great. But yes, my name is Jamie Keddie. I'm a Scottish person. I don't know how you feel about that, a Scottish person. I hope you can understand me. I do try. I try to be understood and neutralize my accent in situations like that, but it doesn't always work, but it usually does. And I'm actually in Barcelona. This is my Barcelona flat. Behind that wall, well, just out that window, in fact, is Barcelona. So if you've never seen Barcelona before, that's what it looks like. That's Barcelona. And yes, as Lise just mentioned, I am a teacher trainer. I'm also a writer, and I'm a storyteller. As a trainer, as a writer, as a teacher, I've got a passion for story and storytelling. And it's really interesting to see where you're all at. Love the Scottish accent. I like that. That's a good start for me. Some people from Spain, Missouri. Tanya there loves Barcelona. Hello, Amal. Hello, everybody. I think what we're going to do, we're going to jump straight into this with a story, okay? I've got a story for you that we're going to start. You're going to listen very carefully, and you're going to enjoy it. That's your task. To listen and enjoy. Do you ever say that to your student? Your task is to enjoy this story. I bet you don't. I've never done it before. I'm just being a bit silly here. But here's the story, and as all good stories should, this one starts with the phrase, once upon a time. Okay, so the story goes like this. Once upon a time, in a small jungle village, there lived a girl named Sarah. Sarah had a pet monkey named Max, who she loved very much. Max was a mischievous monkey. He was always getting into trouble and causing chaos in the village. Now, one day, Sarah was getting in her backyard, enjoying a snack of peanuts. I should have said she was sitting in her backyard, enjoying a snack of peanuts. As she munched on this tasty snack, Max suddenly appeared from out of nowhere, snatched a handful of peanuts right out of Sarah's hand. Sarah exclaimed, "Max, you've stolen my peanuts." Now, Sarah tried to scold Max and made him understand that it was wrong to take things that didn't belong to him. But the monkey just looked at her with a cheeky grin and scampered off into the jungle. Feeling frustrated, Sarah decided to set a trap to catch Max in the act of stealing peanuts. She placed a bowl of peanuts in the jungle and waited, hiding behind a tree. Sure enough, Max soon appeared and went straight for the bowl of peanuts. But as he reached for a nut, he triggered the trap and got caught in a net. "Gotcha," Sarah said triumphantly. Feeling guilty for trapping her beloved pet, Sarah quickly set Max free and apologized for her actions. And from that day on, Max never stole peanuts from Sarah again, and they lived happily ever after. So I hope you listened carefully, and I hope you enjoyed that story. Feel free to let me know what you thought of that story, and you can be brutally honest. I've got very thick skin, so if you didn't enjoy it too much, I can handle that. You don't even know where I got this story from anyway, so I'm going to come back to this story in a moment. Just before I do, can I ask a quick question with my eyes in the chat here? Do you consider yourselves to be storytellers in the classroom? As teachers, do you consider yourselves to be storytellers in the classroom? I love these sort of neutral responses. What a naughty monkey. Uh, mischievous monkey. We've got a couple of no's, a few sort ofs. I've just seen a definitely there. Oh, yeah. There's sometimes, mixed. And this is the sort of standard response I often get to that question when I ask it. And I ask that question a lot. You like to share your personal experiences. God, there's a lot of chat here. It's going quickly, but not to worry because Lisa's on standby to pick up any good comments or questions that are asked. Marianne, what's the target audience age for that story, the monkey story? Well, we'll come back to that, okay? But before we do, in response to your answers to that question, do you consider yourself to be a storyteller in the classroom? I have another story. Okay, we'll come back to the monkey in a moment, but before we go back to the monkey, I've got a second story, and this second story starts with a list of 4 items, and the items on the list are: number 1, Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, which some of you may be familiar with. What Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. Number 2, the Egyptian mummies at the British Museum. The Egyptian mummies at the British Museum. Item number 3, Superman 2. Superman 2, which I watched quite recently, actually. Great film, except for the product placement, Marlborough, which is disgusting. Item number 4 is the Tower of London, where people used to get their heads chopped off. So those are my 4 items on the list: Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, the Egyptian mummies at the British Museum, Superman 2, and the Tower of London, where people used to get their heads chopped off. Not just any people, but enemies of the state, we should say, really. Exactly, Superman 2, the late and great Christopher Reeves, Sean. What do these items have in common? I asked that question in the full knowledge that nobody's ever going to guess the answer. You could say they all form or they all feature in this story. That's absolutely true. Infamy, famous. We've got some Superman 2 fans. That's great. Death, says Linda. They've got death in common. They could. Yes. Item number 1, 2, and 4 all have death. Superman 2 maybe is the odd one out because he tried to stop people from dying, didn't he? But let me tell you, let me contextualize these by telling you the story. Now, I wonder if you can guess my age, because that's kind of relevant here, and how old I was when Superman 2 came out in the cinemas. You know, it was very hard being Scottish, very difficult being Scottish, because when new films came out at the cinema, they'd only ever show them in England. They showed them in England, well, London and England first, and then they'd take a few weeks or even months to get up to Scotland, which is just, I think you'll agree, that's incredibly unfair. And Superman 2, I think it was 1981, I think. And I was about 8 years old. 8 years old. And one thing I'd never done in my life until the age of 8 was to visit the country's capital city, which is, as I'm sure most of you will know, London. And this was my very first trip to London, 1981, when I was about 8 years old. And I want to say I was 7, actually. I want to say I was 7. I'm going to change this. I was 7. Yeah, I think that's important. You'll see why at the end. But just me and my mum, you see. And we took a trip on the train from Edinburgh to London. And on the way, we made a list of all the things we were going to do. and we were going to go to see Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. And we were going to go and see the Egyptian mummies at the British Museum. God, I really, really wanted to do that so much. I wasn't so crazy about Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, but the Egyptian mummies at the British Museum, oh, that was great. Superman 2, it had recently come out at the cinema because it wasn't being shown in Scotland. I was going to become the first boy in my whole school to see Superman 2. And I was going to be a bit of a star for that. And of course, we were going to go to the London Tower, the Tower of London, I should say, where people used to get their heads chopped off. So that's what this list is, a list of things to do in London. Me and my mum, the list we made when I was 7 or 8 years old on the train from Edinburgh to London. Now, the thing is, you see, the thing that I was looking forward to more than anything else, the thing that I wanted to do more than anything was not on the list. I wonder if you can guess what that thing was. What is the thing that I wanted to do in London most of all that actually wasn't on the list? Can you guess? Can you guess? I like these age. People have guessed that I'm 41. Oh, I like that. 49 today. No, I've not been... It's a few months since my birthday. 50, says Tara. 50, and someone's given that a heart. 2 hearts. Don't know what that means. Don't know. Anyway, go on the big wheel, says Marianne. The big wheel in London actually wasn't there. It's only been there for a few years. I think it was probably erected about 10 years ago. So back when I was 7 years old, the big wheel did not exist. Go to Buckingham Palace, and back when I was a child, but you could go and see Buckingham Palace, but you couldn't actually go inside as a visitor, which is something you can do now. Go to the Gherkin. Again, the Gherkin didn't exist, Tanya, when I was a child. Jennifer, just being with your mum. Oh, that's very nice. Yes, that was something I wanted to do that wasn't on the list. Go to Piccadilly Circus. Hamley's Toy Shop. That was something I wanted to do. Some great guesses here and some suggestions. But let me tell you, the thing that I wanted to do more than anything else was to go on the London Underground. I mean, just imagine tunnels under the ground. You know, while everyone else was in the streets above, we would be moving through the earth below. And this to me just seemed absolutely incredible. I mean, I had so many questions. I mean, for example, would it be dangerous? I mean, how would we get down there? Would we have to wear special helmets with torches? You know, there was actually a part of me that didn't really believe that the London Underground existed. It just seemed to be beyond my imagination in so many ways. But of course, as we all know, the London Underground, it did exist. It still does, but not in the way that I'd imagined. I remember my mum said to me, "What did you expect, Jamie?" And I said to her that, you know, I'd expected to see more out of the window. And she said, "But Jamie, we were in a train under the ground. What could you possibly expect to see out of the window in an underground train?" And I didn't say anything. I just kept silent. You know, sometimes you just know that your mum's right, don't you? And my mum's always been right. And I didn't tell her, for example, that I had expected to see, you know, giant worms and dinosaur fossils and stalagmites and stalactites and all those interesting rock formations that you get. And of course, buried treasure and molten lava. I didn't tell her that those were the things I'd be expecting to see. I just kept quiet, you know. Madame Tussauds, I don't get that. At Madame Tussauds, I got caught sticking my fingernail into the face of Sean Connery, James Bond, and I got told off not just by my mum, but one of the security guards. You weren't supposed to touch them. The Egyptian mummies at the British Museum, somebody had been sick right beside the case. It looked disgusting. It smelled even worse. The Tower of London was closed. Can you believe it? although I suspect all these years later that my mum just said that because it was quite expensive to get in. However, Superman 2 was absolutely brilliant. And so the title of the story could be Jamie's Big London Disappointment, or it could be The Day I Was Saved by Superman. I don't know. That's up to you. But that's my first story. I hope you liked it. Which story did you prefer? Did you like my monkey story or my London Disappointment saved by... So type in story 1 or story 2. Which story did you like both? Don't be polite. You have to commit. Story 2, story 2. I'm going to hope you're going to say story 2, because if anybody decides that somebody just said story 1, the monkey, then they said that. I said... Somebody said story 1, the monkey. Somebody's being a cheeky monkey there, obviously. Yeah, the reason you preferred story 2 was quite simply that story 1 was created by ChatGTP. All right? That's where story 1 came from. Story 1 came from ChatGTP. I remember when somebody first showed me AI, ChatGTP said, look what you can do. And I thought, my God, this is incredible. We all did. We all thought this is fantastic. And somebody showed me how to use ChatGTP to write a story. I make YouTube videos. I've got my channel. I'll tell you about it at the end of the talk if you'd like to watch some of my videos. But let me just show you here that I've actually got a playlist dedicated to ChatGTP, where I've explored possibilities for it, not to the extent which Nick has, but what I've done more is explored possibilities for ChatGTP and its ability for creating stories. And although I may have been impressed at the start, I think that if we think that the stories that ChatGTP can create now are good, then there's a problem not just for us as teachers, but a problem for humanity. And if you don't believe me, I'd watch the last video on my list where I interview a friend of mine called Chris Rose, who is he's a doctorate. He has a doctorate in literary theory and creative writing. He's also an author, and a literary author in himself, a very established and successful one. And we make a video and have a discussion about why these stories are so bad. The monkey story, for example, Chris says it kind of looks like a story, it feels like a story, it does all the things that a story expects, and yet it is just parsley, to borrow a sort of image from the Fabulous Baker Boys. I don't know if you've seen that film. Chris refers to it like drinking a coffee-flavored beverage as opposed to a coffee. You know, story has conflict, it has resolution. Stories involve change. Stories involve people and characters and settings. And ChatGTP kind of obeys those rules, but just does not deliver. So please, until ChatGTP and artificial intelligence goes sentient and starts to create stories about real life experiences, stories that are worthy of consuming, don't use them with your students unless you're getting critical about them. You know, the story I shared with you, let's just, what is the value of the second story that I shared with you, Jamie's London Disappointment, Saved by Superman? What was the value of that story? You know, I've made a list of 8 things, I think. Connection, it was personal. To the listener, got my eye on your chat here. Real life, love, travel, engagement. So let me show you, and this is from the eyes of a language teacher here. Suspense, relatable, somebody said, a lovely word. It was involving, a related personal experience. Let me, you felt it. And these are, sometimes it's difficult to put your finger on it, isn't it? But let me show you 8 things that I think are valuable for that story from the point of view as language teachers. I'll go through these very quickly. Let me just tell you how this story came to be. I mean, I was using a course book. This is about 10 years ago, probably. I was teaching in Barcelona. I was working with a group of teenagers. We were using a course book, and the topic of the course book, as so many course books seem to to do is it had a topic on London, you know. Most course books seem to have a topic on London, don't they? And it just had such a standard way in London, you know, home to this many people, home to this many languages, etc. Big Ben, blah, 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 this and that. I thought, well, you know, why don't I just try something I've never tried before? Why don't I introduce the topic with a personal story? And I started to shuffle through my memories. And it took a while to find one, but that one is the memory I found. My very first trip to London. And that was the story. So I used that story to introduce a topic, and I would encourage you to do the same. I don't know about you, but as a teacher trainer myself, I see a very standard approach that teachers use. They have to introduce a topic. So what they do is they go to YouTube to find a video to do the job. We have to stop doing that. That is us outsourcing our own job as human beings to materials. That's us saying we're nothing more than technicians. We are human beings. We can start to introduce topics through our own experiences and our own stories. The second thing I would say is that was quite an unremarkable story. It's quite an unremarkable story, isn't it? And for me, stories which are unremarkable are actually the best ones to use because we're not showing off. You know, I used to have a teacher who told us a lot of stories, and we never warmed to him because he was actually trying to use his stories to show off to us, and it never worked. A word that somebody used, a word I love, which is relatable. The story was meaningful. I mean, what was it about? It was about a child's naive understanding of how the world works. We can all relate to this. We've all got kids. Well, we've all been kids, I should say. Some of us have got kids of our own. So we've all got a similar experience. We've all got possible stories to share. So although my story is unremarkable, it's meaningful. Number 4, you know, we expect students to share their own stories, their own opinions, their own ideas. I think then that the teacher, we've got to lead by example and remove that mask. Human beings are absolutely fascinated by other human beings. Whether or not you realize it, your own students are fascinated by you. They want to know who you are. And this is something we can exploit. That story, you know, tells you a little bit about me and who I am. And that's important because that connects number 5, which through stories like this, we can create connections. We can foster community in the classroom. And that's one of the great values of story for a group. And a story at the end of the day is just a text. We all use stories in the classroom. We all use texts in the classroom. We might think about text as being pieces of paper. And a story can be a piece of paper, or it can be an embodied text, embodied by the teacher. But it offers a rich source of language, doesn't it? There's all sorts of language and phrases and grammar structures and features that we can draw attention to. Let me just give you one of many. There was 3 questions, each with a would structure. I asked before I got to London, a part of me didn't even exist that the London Underground existed. Sorry, I think part of me didn't even believe that the London Underground existed. How would we get down there? Would it be dangerous? Would we have to wear special helmets? 3 questions, each with a would. And that wasn't even by design. That was just me noticing something. Actually, a student noticed that. It was short and sweet. So when we're talking about using teacher stories in the classroom, aim small. Look for short and sweet. I would never want to tell a story which requires students to be listening for anything even close to 10 minutes. I mean, 5 minutes would be an absolute maximum. That one I just told you maybe took 5 minutes, but it was kind of interactive, wasn't it? Which is really what the next part is, number 8. A story is a pretext for stories from students and a pretext for discussion. So that story in the classroom, if I told it, might last for 20 minutes, but that would be because it would be dialogic. There'd be conversation. Can you guess, for example, the thing that I wanted to do more than anything in London, which was not on the list. You were sharing lots of ideas. There's lots of potential for dialogue and conversation actually within the story itself. So a story is a pretext. So those there are my 8 reasons for stories like that being valuable in the language classroom specifically. And I've had my eye off your chat for a while. So as we said, Lisa's had her eye on any important questions, and there will be a Q&A follow-up after this. So if you've asked me any questions, I've not seen them, there will be opportunities later. All right. By the way, just before I forget, there's also a handout for this session, and it's a handout that's taken me all day to prepare. It's 8 pages long. I'm going to tell you 2 more stories. The 2 stories that I'm going to tell you next, you can actually use them in your classroom. And a lot of theory, and the stories are in here. And there's also going to be a lesson plan that's included as well. So we will give you, we'll drop in the link at the end of the session, which will allow you to download the handout. How does that sound? Great. And it's actually been dropped in there. You can do it now, but don't go away yet. Stay with me, because I've got another story for you. And this second story is called Frankie 1, Students Nil. And just with that title, I wonder if you can guess what this story is about. Matthew says, I love story time. Me too. And Kim has said sports. I have a story course that I teach online. It's called the Lesson Stream Story Course. And what I'm just doing right now is an example of story priming. We prime students for things. We prime students for listening. We prime students for reading. In this case, we're priming students for a story. You might call this a prediction activity, but why do we get students to predict? There's all sorts of reasons. Prediction is good for comprehension. Prediction is great for getting students to produce language and speak, for example. Prediction is great for getting students curious for the story. So this is an example, one of about 12 different story priming techniques that I identify and teach in the Lesson Stream Story course. It's quite simply using the title, crafting a title which is curiosifying. And that title is Frankie 1, Students Nil. Great. Okay. I'm going to tell you this story, and then afterwards I'm going to ask you some comprehension questions, okay? So you have to listen very carefully. Listen carefully. All right. Here's the story. Now, what is it about teenagers and practical jokes? When I was a teenager at school, we used to think it was hilarious to play jokes on our teachers. It was always a bit risky, of course, but it didn't stop us. I wonder if you can relate to this. And one of the practical jokes that I remember that we were very fond of is that we used to love leaving notes on our teachers' desks. Notes which looked like this. Notes written inside a little piece of paper folded up. Are you with me? So can you see where this is going, what the idea was? The idea was that we would be hoping that during the lesson, the teacher would notice the note, pick it up out of curiosity, open the note, and then read the message inside. And then we would wait for some kind of reaction according to what the message was, according to what the specific note was. That was the trick. I don't know what you think of it. Kind of standard teenager stuff, you know. Now, I don't remember much. We experimented with this technique quite a bit, and because I'm quite a bit older than most of you guessed, and because my teenage days at school were quite long ago, I don't really remember many of the notes that we actually left, many of the messages that we left in these pieces of paper, except for one. this has to have been the best note. That's what Jimmy Smith is asking. This is the best note we left. Are you ready for this? Okay. This is genius, I think. I don't think this is my idea. I don't remember whose idea this was. But here's the message. There is a piece of cheese on the classroom ceiling. Can you get that? There is a piece of cheese on the classroom ceiling. So you get this, don't you? You understand this. You're with me, right? What the reaction we were expecting. We were hoping the teacher would notice the note, pick it up, open the note, and then look up at the classroom ceiling, trying to find this fictitious piece of cheese. And we would all have to do our very best not to laugh, not to smile. We'd have to try to keep a straight face. And it was very important that we didn't laugh, that we didn't smile, that we did keep a straight face. Because, if you smiled or laughed, you would probably demonstrate that you were involved in the joke. And you would get caught, and you wouldn't want that, right? What do you think of that? Was that clever? Was that funny? How would you feel if you were a teacher and your students pranked you in this way? I don't remember how many teachers we played this joke on, but I'll never forget the day we used this trick with Frankie. Frankie was our cool history teacher, and Frankie was as cool as a cucumber. We've all had these teachers, haven't we? We all want to be those teachers, don't we? I don't know about you, but I'm a very, in the classroom, I'm a very uncool teacher. I'm a never like I drop things. I'm scatty. Frankie was he was as cool as a cucumber, but we were trying to prank Frankie, you see. So we left the note on Frankie's desk, and I mean, it must have been, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the lesson. No, it was almost towards the end of the lesson, you see, and we were starting to think that Frankie was not going to notice the note because there's only about 5 minutes left. But then, just before the end of the class, his eyes fell on the note on his desk, you see, and he stopped talking. He paused. He noticed the note, and he picked it up, and he opened the note, and he read the note. We're going to stop the story there for just a moment, okay? And I mentioned there will be some comprehension questions. Now, I wonder, when I told you that there would be some comprehension questions, I wonder what kind of questions you would be expecting me to ask you. I've got 10 here, but let me ask, did you or have you made any predictions? And I know you did, because when I told you the title, Frankie won, Students Nil, and I asked you, what do you think this story is about? Some of you said sports. A few of you might have guessed correctly that Frankie is a teacher. Just the fact that he appears in the same title as my students, Frankie and Students, would kind of lead you to assume or correctly predict that he is a teacher. So maybe, and I've paused before we get to the end of the story. So right now, whether or not you have a good idea of how the story ends, you've got some kind of idea, even if it's very vague. You probably know that Frankie is going to win this because of the title. I wonder if anybody has actually predicted. I've had my eye off the chat here. You think so? Kathy says Frankie said that the first one who finds it gets extra credit. How will he just acts, he does nothing. He continues talking about the mystical cheese in the ceiling without looking up. Marianne thinks that he's going to actually triumph over the students. Um, okay, so predicting, as we all know, is a really standard way to get involved with a story, isn't it? As teachers, we all use it as a technique, as a device. Okay, number two, when I told you my story, and feel free to keep answering these questions, did you think about somebody that you know or somebody that you used to know? For example, a teacher that you used to have. We've all had a cool teacher, haven't we? I remember Frankie and other teachers who maybe were almost as cool as Frankie. Maybe you thought about a student that you have who's a bit of a practical joker, you know? Number three, did you, maybe you didn't, but it's possible, did you form any opinions? Did you think, teenagers, what are they like? Making teachers' lives more difficult than they should be with their practical jokes. You might even have judged me just a little bit. Jamie was a typical teen. What's he like? You probably didn't, but you might have. You might have. Jamie Smith, another Jamie, great name, Jamie. Although I can't, it's come to my attention that there's some people called Jamie in North America that are girls or women, and I can't say that I condone that. So Jamie, you're, as long as you're male, I'm all right. I just can't get used to female Jamies. I'm looking at your girlfriend's name is Jamie, says Emma. So I'm gradually getting used to it. I am gradually getting used to it. But it's taken a long, long time. Taking a long, long time. Yes. So a lot of your fellow students were jerks, says David there. I'm trying to multitask. Your mum was a Jessie, says your son is Jamie, not a popular male name. And it seems to be more of a name for females, isn't it? Over in I've got a friend here in Barcelona, another Jamie, and she happens to be a woman. So yeah, I'm getting used to it. So yes, some of you will maybe have formed opinions. Number 4, did you empathize with any of the characters? Even though I didn't directly mention any of the other teachers, did you maybe think, oh, poor teachers, you know? Or maybe you created some sort of bond with Frankie, you know? Did you place yourself in the story? Maybe you wondered, how would I behave or how would I react in this situation? Did you visualize? I'm sure you did. Of course you did. It's actually impossible not to visualize. Some people say, I'm visual because I visualize. No, we're all visual. I worked with a blind student once who we used to talk a lot about visualization. So it's not only for those who are not visually impaired. Visualizing is a key part of working with a story, of reading, of listening. You will have visualized my classroom, perhaps. It might have been quite vague. You may have visualized teenage Jamie. You will maybe have visualized Frankie. Did he have a beard, a moustache? Was he bald? Was he clean shaven? Was he smart dressed? Was he slick? How old was he? Did you visualize the cheese on the classroom ceiling? And if so, was it Edam? Was it Brie? Was it Gouda? Was it some Spanish manchego? Number 7, did you ask any questions? I mean, there's a sort of predictive question, where's the story going? But maybe you wondered, is this a true story? Very, very relevant question you could ask. Or what kind of school did Jamie go to? Or was Jamie the ringleader here? Was he the one that was orchestrating this prank? I'll tell you, I was not. I was always a backseat student. Maybe you thought, how could you possibly stick a piece of cheese in the classroom ceiling? Would you use blue tack or staples or sellotape? Or maybe it would just stick itself. Maybe if you pushed it hard enough, it'd just go, you know, squash it against the ceiling, make it stick. I don't know. I've never tried it. That could be your homework. Send us a photograph of a piece of cheese on the ceiling, put it on Instagram, hashtag ElliiCon 2023. Go on, I dare somebody to do that. Put a and hashtag lesson stream as well, because I want to see it. On your classroom ceiling before your students come to work. In fact, I never thought about doing that when I use this story in the classroom. What a great idea that would be. Number 8, did you find a story of your own in my story? Maybe a time when a student played a practical joke on you as a teacher, or you played a practical joke on your students, or you played a practical joke on your teacher when you were younger. Did you draw any conclusions from my story? I mean, you know, when I tell you how it ends, you might think, maybe Frankie knew what was going to happen. Maybe other teachers had told him about this prank that was going around the school, which would underline the importance of sharing intelligence of the information type with other teachers in the staff room. And finally, the final comprehension question is, do you like this story? You don't know yet because it's not finished, but will you use this yourself? Do you think it's funny, for example? You know, and you have my permission to use this with your own students. You can tell them it's your own it's your own story. I don't mind. You can use the text. The text is included in the handout. I mentioned that before. I'll drop in the text, the link again later. But you want to know, that's a great question from Maria. Maria says, are these comprehension questions? And I love that question from Maria, because people who work in language education, I think we can be forgiven for confusing or conflating comprehension with understanding. And we kind of get confused between the two things. And when we think of comprehension questions, and when we think about comprehension, I think it's easy for language teachers to think of comprehension as, which is something that students either get or they don't. It's binary. It's black or white. And often comprehension questions are designed accordingly. Comprehensions can be multiple choice. Comprehension questions can be answered in such a way that allow the student to demonstrate either, yes, I comprehended it, or no, I did not. Yes, I got it, or no, I didn't. I was actually very bad at school. I was always confused. I was a very confused child. They used to call me at school, Jamie didn't get it, Keddie. And didn't get it means is Scottish for doesn't understand. I was a great daydreamer, and they always called me Jamie didn't get it, Keddie. And I never knew why. But anyway, the point is I'm making here is comprehension is much more than just getting it or not getting it. Of course, we have to understand the language and the text. That goes without saying, but once we do reach what's sometimes referred to as a state of zero uncertainty, that is understanding or being satisfied that we understand every word, phrase in the text, then it's time for us to make meaning. We interpret the story, you know, it's very subjective. As we've said, we find ourselves in it. We make connections with characters, and we make predictions, we visualize, we ask questions, we judge, we draw conclusions, we enjoy, or maybe we don't. And that is what comprehension most fundamentally is. Comprehension is making meaning. And so much of the meaning that we make is personal. And the questions that I've asked you, which I can call, we could call divergent comprehension questions, are the type that we can ask our students after they've read or after they listen to a story. Ask them questions like these, then ask them to share their experiences. It's a really good way to illustrate the point that although we might think there's only one video or one text or one story, there's actually a different video or a different text and a different story for every human in the classroom. The stories happen here. You want to know the end of the story, don't you? Let's go back. Okay. So, Frankie, we left the note on Frankie's desk. Frankie, our cool history teacher, who was as cool as a cucumber. It's about 5 minutes from the end of the class. We thought that Frankie was not going to notice the note, but then he did. His eyes connected with the piece of paper on his desk. He paused. He even may have stopped talking. He picked up the note. He opened the note. He read the message inside. And then, very slowly, he walked towards the corner of the classroom. And as he did, he crumpled up the note. And when he reached the corner of the classroom, he dropped the note into the bin. He turned back towards the front of the class, walked back towards where he had been, where he picked up the note, eyes staying on us, the students. Not once did his eyes stray from us as he walked back towards us, and he said to us, I know there is. I put it there. And we all, every single one of us in unison, looked up. Frankie won, students nil. Please feel free to use this story with your students in your own classroom, okay? Because there may be elements, you know, this is how stories work. We pass them on. This story could become apocryphal in the sense that, you know, it could become an urban legend. People say this happened to a friend of mine. You could even say it happened to you. I don't mind. All right. Listen, one more story, I think. One more story. And for this last story, oh, thank you for the plot ending, the nice things I'm seeing. This is what I refer to this as a story pathway. And this is a technique that I also teach on the Lesson Stream Story course. This is a technique that I absolutely love, and students do too. Students really, really appreciate this. What you see here is a list of phrases that appear in a story, the story text, in the same order as you're going to hear them. All right? Actually, these relate to a photograph. It's a photograph that I'm looking at right now because it's on my desk. I can see it, but you can't. So we've got a regular young man. We've got stamp collecting. We've got, although you probably don't know his name, I could ask you how you might complete that sentence, but I'm not going to. A family snapshot. We've got somewhere in Midwest USA shortly before 1940. We've got lined up for the camera. We've got, and I'm reading these back to front, by the way, so I hope you're impressed. To focus on something, his iconic round spectacles. This is hurting my brain. A graceful smile by all accounts, but surely he must have wished that in the foreground of the picture. What's the point in this? There's 4 things. Number 1, it allows us to bring phrases, language into play. This is another story priming technique. It allows us to maybe pre-teach, let's say, words and phrases that students are going to meet, or prime them for those language. Number 2, it's really good for comprehension. It allows students to sort of get an idea of where this story is going to go from a sort of linguistic point of view. Number 3, it will allow them to predict. We may ask them to put their predictions into words, although we don't have to. And again, when you construct some sort of predictive text in your mind, that is absolutely great when you come to compare it with the story that you hear. that comparison is great for comprehension. And in this case, it's comprehension of both the understanding type and also the divergent interpretive type. And also number 4, again, it's great for curiosifying. Now you've seen this, you want to know the story, don't you? And as I mentioned to you, this actually relates to a photograph. It's a photograph that I'm looking at right now. And I remember actually seeing this photograph for the first time when I was a child in a book that I had. And I've seen it a few times since. And I find it to be quite an impactful photograph. And it's a black and white photograph. In this photograph, it's a family photograph, let's say, and there are 7 people in this photograph. Now, I'm looking at it right now, so I can see it, but you can't. You can't see through the paper, I hope. No, you can't. But let me just tell you about this photograph. Well, I told you that there's 7 people in this photograph, right? And one of them is called Robert. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Robert. You see, in many respects, Robert was a regular young man, a kid, to be honest. Robert was just a kid. And in many ways, he had a regular life. He liked doing what other kids like doing. He liked stamp collecting. Apparently, he was very fond of photography. He loved his family. And although you probably don't know his name, his full name, which I'm not going to give to you because the teenagers that you are, you'll Google it. I don't want you to do that. So although you probably don't know his full name, I'm almost sure that you'll recognize him when I show you this photograph. Now, I've seen lots of photographs of Robert, but this one's my favorite. I think you might call it a family snapshot. A snapshot is quite funny, isn't it? You don't tend to use that word snapshot anymore, do you? It kind of belongs to days before Instagram. But I like it, and I want to keep it going. So it's a family snapshot taken somewhere in Midwest USA in a garden shortly before 1940. And in the photograph, we can see Robert's family, his mother and father, his brothers and sisters. They're all lined up for the camera, and everybody is smiling. And Robert is standing proudly behind them all. Let me get this right. He's got his right hand. He's got his left hand on his father's shoulder, and he's got his right hand on his brother Eugene's shoulder. And as I look at this picture, I always find myself focusing on Robert's face, his iconic round glasses, and in particular his graceful smile. And I always find myself wondering, did he suffer? How did he feel? What was his life like? By all accounts, according to everything I've heard and read, Robert never complained, and he did everything he could to enjoy the short time that he had in this world. But surely he must have wished that he could join his family in the foreground of this photograph, like any typical person, any typical boy. Because Robert died when he was just 22 years old. And the question for you is, who was Robert? Why do we remember him? And which book did I first see this photograph in? And I'm going to, you like that word, Jamie says, curiosifying. No, I invented that word, but you can have it. What I've just demonstrated there is a technique that I use, and I call this picture telling. Picture telling is storytelling a picture. I don't have to explain it, do I? But it's in a picture telling activity, the teacher stands at the front of the class, assuming, of course, that it's the teacher that's doing the picture telling, which it doesn't always have to be. Ultimately, you want students to be the picture telling. But when you are the picture teller, you stand at the front of the class with an image in hand, and you communicate to your students as a storyteller would. And the success to picture telling, and this is the success to all storytelling. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, and this is absolutely key. This is absolutely essential. And people tell me that I'm a good storyteller. And of course, I like to hear that, but it wasn't always the case. Storytelling takes a lot of hard work, a lot of practice. If you're a teacher, it's the perfect time to hone this skill. But I hadn't actually mentioned what the secret is. The secret to storytelling success is preparation. Prepare your stories. And so, look, you're going to see this image in a moment. I have actually put my notes, I placed my storytelling pathway over the image to help me. Your students don't have to know that. It's your little secret. It just helps you. But I could have put my entire text over it, because there is a text as well. Here is my picture telling text. That's the text there. Can you see that? This is included in the handout. And so that's what I just told you. Would you like me to show you the picture? Would you like me to? If you were my students, I would listen to your ideas here. We'd have a bit of discussion. Then I would repeat that picture telling, not just twice, but 3, 4, or even 5 times. Each time your students get another opportunity to visit the text. Robert Pershing Wadlow was the tallest man in medical history. Died at the age of 22 years old. At the age of 22, obviously, and the height of 2.72 meters. And he was what's often referred to a gentle giant. And that was picture telling. And you'll see that I think teachers, we often associate images with descriptive texts. But in picture telling, there may be elements of description there. There was a bit, but really, there's narrative, and there was a lot about the association, the relationship between the image and this here, me, my brain. So when you use this activity with your students, and I hope you do, it's in the handout, make changes to the text that you like, and make it reflect your own relationship with the image. And we're just about to start picture telling in the lesson stream story course. So let me just a few things here. I mentioned the I mentioned the handout, and the handout also includes the 3 stories, the London story. It includes the piece of cheese in the classroom ceiling story, all the questions. It includes some theory about what we've gone into in a bit more detail. And of course, this Robert Pershing Wadlow picture telling activity, which is for you to use with your students. Also, there's a lesson plan, a lesson stream lesson plan for you, which is a great story. It's one of my favorite stories. You tell it to your students, then they've got to guess whether or not the story is true, whether or not it really happened to you. And when you download these lesson plans, I'll also sign you up for my newsletter, which is called the Lesson Stream Post. You'll get regular storytelling ideas straight to your inbox. Now, that's everything. I've got 1 minute for a question.
1 minute for a question. No, we don't have time for questions because we still have to announce our prize. So for all the questions that you guys put in the Q&A section, make your way on over to the table. Jamie's going to be at the presenter table, and you can talk to him there and ask all your questions. Sorry, we didn't get time to answer those live, but we do have time very quickly to announce our prize winner. So Jamie, do you want to hold up that prize one more time
It's
quickly?
it's been thirsty work. I'm just going to display this slide for just a moment here,
Yeah,
Lise. It's
go ahead.
thirsty work, and it's very important to stay hydrated with an Ellii bottle, which keeps your water temperature fresh. And that's what's. I can't believe I forgot to drink while I was doing this. It's just I forget to stay hydrated.
There you go. So that is the prize that we're drawing for right now. And Jamie, if you could just read off the name of our winner as I show them on stage here.
Yes, and the winner there is, that's Mila F from Canada.
Woo! Congratulations. We will be in contact with you soon to make sure you get your Ellii water bottle. For everyone else that didn't get a prize, remember, go ahead, Jamie.
I forgot to drop the link for my handout into the chat. Sorry, Lise. I'll just do that right now, then I'll stop interrupting.
Yes, go right ahead. Actually, I think we've already got it up there. It seems to be pinned at the top of the chat. So we got you covered. Okay, excellent. So everyone, we've got a 15-minute break now. Please make your way over to the tables. Jamie's going to be at our presenter table. And that's it for now. So thank you very much. Coming up next, we've got our CEO and founder, Ben Buchwald, leading our Lunch and Learn session on teaching with Ellii. So we'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Thanks again, Jamie.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone. Ellii.